Really? Okay. I'm good. Start in 1 minute. You don't really have to do an intro. Unless you really, really want to.
Okay.
It's being recorded, so do something.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Owning Microsoft Outlook with PowerShell talk. It's the last talk of the day. Presenting this is one of our instructors for Chiron. It's Andrew Cole, and I will turn it over to him.
You know you're really, really special when you get to have an intro. It warms the cockles of my heart. So, everyone enjoying NolaCon so far? Having a happy little time? All right. As you mentioned, this is Owning Microsoft Outlook with PowerShell. It is the last talk of the day. Best part about being the last talk of the day is no one really cares if you end a little bit early or run a little bit long, which is good because I timed this out 3 different times, and each time I ended up with a completely different time. So it's going to be what it's going to be. All right. So who am I? My name is Andrew Cole. If you want to reach me, I pretty much exist on social media solely on Twitter. Other than that, I'm not a big social media fan, but I am at Culmination. I currently do work for Chiron Technology Services on their information operations team. I do development content and teach a bunch of classes, and in my spare time I do some security research. So anybody here who says they're a security researcher knows that basically means you spend a lot of time on Google and try to break crap. That's it. There's no qualifications for the job. So prior to my time at Chiron, I was a journeyman interactive operator for the U.S. Army for many years. I've given a talk at B-Sides Augusta, so this is only my second talk, so for the love of God, please be gentle with me. Woo! B-Sides Augusta. All right, so first I want to thank my employer for basically giving me a paid vacation for my wife and I in New Orleans. That was awesome. Yay! Second off, I want to thank the NolaCon crew for providing the vessel that allowed me to get my employer to give a paid vacation for my wife and I in New Orleans. So, win-win. A couple other people I want to throw a shout out to because their work is sort of what I helped build this work off of. Ed Wilson, so the Microsoft scripting guy. If you're into PowerShell, his blog, he puts things up there that it's like he doesn't know that he works for Microsoft. He's like, here's how you change timestamps on files on the Microsoft operating system. And it's like, okay, that's good. Also, Matt Nelson, really smart young guy, works for the Varus Group. And so I took inspiration from some of their code for what we're going to go over today. Okay, so why did I pick Outlook and PowerShell? Who here uses Outlook at work? Yeah. Who here uses PowerShell at work? Wow, shame on you. There should be more hands than that. PowerShell is awesome. You can do anything with it. So the big reason I like using PowerShell for exploitation, there's a couple reasons. One, it's going to be present in every environment. God willing, any place that you're pen testing is not going to have anything older than Windows 7. And if you've got Windows 7, you've got PowerShell version 2 by default straight out of the box. So that's a nice little added bonus. The other wonderful thing is, one, a lot of admins aren't using PowerShell, or if they are using PowerShell, they're not properly auditing it or monitoring it, so you can get away with a lot of different things. Lastly, how many red teamers or pen testers do I have in the room? Couple? So everyone has their own custom tools, and great thing about your custom tools is that there's no signatures for them, so it's awesome, but that only happens until someone signatures your tool, then there's signatures for it, and you're kind of hosed. So why would you use your custom tool set unless you absolutely have to? If there's something already on the box that's there by default, why don't we just use that instead? So you can use a lot of the things that you're probably currently using a custom tool set for. You can do those same actions just using PowerShell and things that are already on the box. So we're going to look at how you can use Outlook basically to work hand in hand with PowerShell. I don't want to say we're exploiting Outlook. We're using it as a helper or a buddy. All right. So a lot of what we're doing here is we're going to be basically taking advantage of the Outlook Interop assembly. So an Interop assembly is basically, it's an Interop assembly provided by Microsoft that sort of makes a bridge to the applications and COM. So it's a big beneficial there. It lets you go between .NET and COM. And we use this technique for the bulk of what we're going to do here. So the first thing we're doing is we're adding a new type assembly for Microsoft Office Interop Outlook. So again, it's already pre-canned. It's on the box. We're then going to define a variable as Outlook folders, which just points to the default folders that are already there for Outlook. We're then going to do Outlook new object, defined in the COM object is Outlook application, and then namespace to be that new object's namespace mappy. So once we've done that, we basically have full unfettered access to anything that is in that user's Outlook. So calendars, inbox, sent folder, contacts, anything they have in Outlook, we have full access to it now. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at using this for some data mining. So at the end of the day, a lot of the time, what the customer needs is that so what, why you should care sort of thing. Yes, you have a vulnerability. They're like, well, that's not a big deal. Well, then when you show them, like, their personal calendar, and it's like, well, here's where you were during these hours, and here's the email from your wife. And then they sort of go, oh, wow, this is a vulnerability. I need to patch my system. I need to get this out. So we're going to use this to sort of just harvest whatever we want out of either the inbox, sent items, calendar, what have you. Is that maximized? There we go. Wish I had a dual monitor set up. This is going to be very interesting. Come back. Oh, don't do that. Maybe 1 second. All right, we're going to have to do this the hard way. I'm going to have to find. I'm going to have to scroll down to the code section I want and then move it over there because I can't see that monitor very well at all. All right, so I'm skipping the parameters and such because those are less important. So that first part up top is just the interop assembly that we were loading up in the last slide. And after that, we're just saying what we want to do with the particular data. So do we want to grab the inbox? Do you want to grab the sent items, contacts, what have you? They're all just folders. They're defined by folder numbers. And just by changing the folder number that we're feeding to it, we can tell it what to grab and pull. And I promise all the code is up on GitHub, and I'll give you the link to that if you want to grab the code samples later to dig through. So let me... All right. My original plan was to have great live demos. But it turns out to use Outlook and Exchange for various items. Well, for starters, I had to run a DC, an Exchange server, 2 workstations, and once I had all that RAM absorbed, it sort of slowed my demos down to crap. So we went ahead and went to just videos. I ended up recording on my hardware at work where I had more RAM to work with because otherwise my poor little box just started crying. Nonetheless, it's a good idea to pray to the demo gods to give you a good display. So I have a glorious video clip here. Oh, don't do that. There we go. All right. There we go. So what it's doing in a nutshell is we're just going to look into each of the folders, and it's a harvester script. It's designed to harvest the contents of it to grab either In this case, it's grabbing, it looks like the inbox there. We can later point it to the send items folder. We can point it to their contact information, anything that's stored in Outlook. By default, I only have it set to grab items that ship with Outlook on its own. So that's going to be inbox, sent, calendar, contacts, and tasks. But all those items can be harvested. If they start making their own custom folders where they're storing things, you're going to have to pull what that Outlook folder number is and then point it to that to access that particular folder. I'm not going to know what those are by default, but it does grab the full information. Now for the harvesting script for grabbing emails, it can either grab just a summary listing of what is in the email, so who it's from, obviously it came to you, the date it was sent, and the subject line. It can also pull the full contents. When it pulls the full contents, know that it's going to be harvesting all the metadata as well. So you're going to get the network interface adapter that actually received the packet from wherever. It's going to get the full HTML code that set up the email itself. So there's going to be a very large amount of information there. So if you do pull it on a live active system, you want to be careful and make sure you're not grabbing an inbox that has 5,000 items in it, because if it has 5,000 items, one, you're going to spike the crap out of the processor and the RAM load on the box. And two, it's going to take it somewhere in the ballpark of hours for it to finish up. Go away. All right, so that's just the basics. Obviously, we probably want to do a little more than just grab information. That's not a huge deal. We want to know how we can leverage this for some of our other possible actions. So I assume people here do client-side exploitation sometimes for your initial access into networks. You have to get someone to click on something, and email is an easy way to do it. Is anyone familiar with SCLs? Spam confidence level? So when you have an Exchange server, and I realize this doesn't actually touch Outlook, but it counts for Exchange, so I'm calling it still in the realm. When you send an email, it's assigned a value by Exchange. It's called the spam confidence level. Numbers range anywhere from 0 to 9, or if it is from a trusted email address inside the network, it gets a value of -1. Now, based on the number that it's given, so a 0 is something that it's almost 100% positive is not spam. If it gets a 9, basically it's an email from a Nigerian prince who wants to sell you Viagra on the side. You just need his bank account information. Based on which value it's given, it's going to clip a threshold. And when it clips that threshold, it tells Exchange what to do with it. So typically like 0 through 2, it'll just deliver the email. If you get a 3 or a 4, it'll trip the junk threshold, in which case it gets put in the junk folder. Quarantine is not normally there. It has to be turned on. It's not a default action. But if you turn it on, it quarantines it on the Exchange server in a special folder that only Exchange admins can get into. So basically you're caught. But again, that's not on by default. The other actions are to reject or delete, which the only difference is basically whether or not it notifies the sender that their email was dropped. So why do we care about this? There's a built-in commandlet in PowerShell. It's only on PowerShell for Exchange servers, so you're not going to be able to run this from a regular box. However, if you do get creds, you can remote into the Exchange server, or you can, if you exploit onto the Exchange server, you can put rules down in place that make things easier for you the next time you have to client-side somebody. So the number of parameters that are available for this commandlet for a new transport rule are ridiculous. Some of the things, you're just like, why would they even make that? But you can have it set a specified SCL based on certain criteria, like if it is sent from this particular address, give it an SCL of -1. So now every single email that we send from our attacking address is going to get sent as a trusted email to the inbox. Nothing will ever go to junk. It'll never get quarantined. It'll never get deleted or rejected. Other things you can do, maybe you just want to track a specific user's email. There's this great option, this bottom rule. So the top example there, the new transport rule, name set SCL from this attacker, sent to this target, set the SCL to -1. We probably want to have both those fields in there, because if you just say anything going to this target, set the SCL to -1, well, now the actual Nigerian prince emails are going directly to their inbox and not junk. So that might set off a red flag. But we can say if it comes from us, I tap my chest a lot. If it comes from us and goes to this person, set it to -1. It's going to be automatically trusted. That second example there, new transport rule, name, doesn't matter, whatever you want to call it. If it's sent to this target, blind copy to, so anyone want to take a stab in the dark what that's going to do? So we just set this to our target, and every single email that gets sent to them ever, the Exchange server is going to add a BCC line to send a copy to us. So now we automatically collect all their email without even having to be on their box. So it's the beautiful part of PowerShell for Exchange. Okay, so once you get past client side, the next thing we want to look at is obviously persistence, right? Got to have persistence, a way to get onto a box. You know, exploitation's kind of a bit of work. Cleaning up after it's even more work. And sometimes exploits have less than ideal side effects, like crushing a service or possibly blue screening a box. So backdoors are our friends. Generally, you know, your backdoors fall into one of two categories. It's either going to be a listening backdoor, which is going to bind a socket on the host, or it's going to be a beaconing backdoor that's going to call back to us at a set interval. They both have issues. So your listening backdoor is your most basic backdoor, but it's so easy to catch with host-based detection. You've got a socket sitting open. That's never good. It's very obvious that something is doing something shady there. Your beaconing backdoor, really hard to find on the host if you have a good persistence method, but that heartbeat that's popping out on the wire, network IDS can catch that pretty easily. So the ideal way to do it, who here has a tool that they use for triggerable access to get onto a target? So there's no beacon, there's no listening port, you just send a specialized trigger to the box. When it sees the trigger, it either calls you out to you or it opens up a listening port. Nobody? Oh, triggerable access is the way to go. So we're going to show how we can create triggerable access. The great part about triggerable access, there's no bound port sitting there for anyone to find. There's no socket, There's no unnecessary traffic flying across the network when we don't want a connection. And we've got 24/7 access to the box. Outlook is a natural trigger. I mean, think about what it's designed to do. It's designed to take traffic from anywhere on the internet and redirect it directly to your user. That's sort of what our trigger packet is. So why can't we just use Outlook as our triggering mechanism? Okay, this is only a triggering mechanism. It is not a true persistence method. You're going to have to use some other persistence method to start this script up. But once the script does start up, it's going to be your triggerable access. So it's going to have you not have that network traffic or port bound. You do still need a persistence method, and you're going to have your payload, of course. This general idea was written by Matt Nelson. He did a really good article. I liked his. It was a little bit of a resource hog, and my big issue, though, it didn't do full cleanup, I guess would be the easiest way to say it. So it would get the trigger email, it would then delete the email, but there's some other things it didn't do, like it didn't delete the email from the deleted items folder, so your trigger email was still in that deleted items folder for forever. It also didn't mark the email as read, so it would go to deleted items, and then there'd be a little 1 in Outlook that said, hey, you have an unread email in your deleted items folder. So we streamlined it a little bit. So what the script's going to do in a nutshell, it's going to monitor the inbox looking for a particular trigger script, or a trigger email. It's going to look for a particular username and subject line. So whoever it comes from and the subject line, if they match what we have set in the script, it'll then start whatever payload we tell the script to point to. It will then, after it detects the email, it'll start that payload, have the payload call you out, after which it's going to delete the email It's going to remove it from the deleted items folder, and then it's going to go into a sleep cycle and then start listening again over and over again and monitoring that inbox. Yes. In fact, here's the awesome part. If you run the script, when it creates that COM object, guess what it does if Outlook's not running? Starts Outlook. So yeah, that's the little side part. So it has to be an environment where somebody's going to have Outlook running all the time. I know, at least in most of the work environments I worked in, most people had Outlook set to start on startup. Like, why would you not have Outlook running? If you don't do email, then honestly you're Googling stuff and not actually working anyways. So it's not without its little hiccups. Yeah, when you start the script, it's gonna start Outlook, but it's gonna start Outlook for that user. So they'll be like, oh, that's convenient. Somebody must have added this for me. That's wonderful. Okay, so the largest issue with it is that actually here, let me just go to the code real quick. We'll pop a little bit of code up there and then I have a great little demo video. How am I doing for time? We're doing okay. All right. Down to the code. So I also have this set, so in the script you can tell it in your parameters whether you want it to scan the inbox or the junk folder. So if you know your emails are popping on that SCL, and things that can pop on an SCL are things like an attachment. If it has an attachment that has any execution whatsoever, it tends to bump up the SCL by at least 2. If it has a active link in it, that usually bumps your SCL up by 1 or 2 as well. So if you have either one of those, there's a good chance you're going to get rerouted to junk. So if you know your email's going there anyways, why not just have it monitor the junk folder for you? So what we've got going over here, again, basically it's just going to define the inbox as your target environment. It's then going to say for each email it's going to define emails as objects that are in that inbox. And then for each one, it's just going to scroll through them all one at a time and check to see the sender and the subject line. If the sender and the subject line match what's in the trigger, do what we told you to do. If not, skip it and move on. Go to the next email. After it runs through all of them, if it doesn't see the trigger email at all anywhere, it's going to just go into a sleep cycle. The delay is fully customizable. When you start the script, you can tell it a delay of however long you want it to go for, and that's how long it'll sleep. It'll then, after it sleeps, go back to the first email in the box and run through them all again. It does use a little bit of resources on the box. So I found on average, on a typical PC build, you're going to not touch CPU usage at all. But that continuous monitoring, if you have that delay set really short at like 2 or 3 seconds, it's going to increase the RAM usage by about 8%. If you cut that time out to more like 30 seconds, it's only going to see probably about a 4% bump in RAM usage, which no user's really going to notice. All right, so I have another glorious little video here that is going to run through, and if I can get that minimized. There we go. So for the sake of the video, I chose the simplest, easiest payload I could, which is, like all exploit sample code, it's a calculator. So it's going to look for a trigger email. When it finds the trigger email, it's going to start our payload, which is, in this case, a calculator. Does that look like it's running? It looks like it was, and it just stopped. Yeah, so I believe the email that it's looking to trigger on is from like abadUser@malware.com, and the trigger word I believe I said is trigger. But again, it's just going to, is that running? Or is it just sitting there? No, it's running. Okay. So it's just going to monitor that inbox. I put the email in the junk folder so that it'll just keep running and scanning the inbox and nothing will happen. And then when I move that email from the junk folder to the inbox, it's going to set off the trigger, and theoretically, we're going to get a calculator. I don't see how anything can go wrong since it's a recording. But, knock on wood. Yeah, so I have it in verbose mode there, so it's just scanning through, and I just have some write verbose lines in there. Whenever you're writing anything in PowerShell, write verbose is the most awesome thing ever. It lets you put in things to let you know what point in the script you're actually at. So it's just going through saying, hey, I'm looking, I haven't found anything. I believe I set the delay to something like 1 or 2 seconds, so it's going really fast. But now, as soon as we move the email in there, it triggered and it kicked off our calculator. You probably wouldn't want to use a calculator in the real world. You'd probably want to have that be, a reverse payload that's going to call back to your attack platform. And then it deleted the folder. And the first thing it does is it marks it as red and deletes it. So that way it's visible to the user for the smallest amount of time possible. No, come back here. But it is still going to be visible to the user for a short period of time. There's not much we can really do about that. So the largest issue with that method was, again, the email is going to be sitting there. We're not going to set our time delay to 1 second because then it would be just spiking the crap out of resources. And people notice when something like Word takes 40 minutes to type out a word. So we have to set that time interval to be a longer thing so we're not overloading the memory on the box. When we do that, obviously, it's going to sit there for a little while. Also, whenever our email comes in, what happens in Outlook when you get an email and you have Outlook minimized? You get that little thing in the lower right-hand corner. So the user is going to notice that they're getting emails. Eventually, they're going to wonder why they keep getting this email from nowhere that keeps deleting itself and then disappearing off the box. That's not normal behavior. An overly paranoid user, or even a sane one, would probably start to notice that for a while. So what if we had an email that was completely benign and that didn't look to have any threat or risk to it whatsoever? Would we really care if the user sees that? I wouldn't. Who here gets an email from, who here has a LinkedIn account? Okay, so how many job offers do you get a month from LinkedIn? Hey, I saw your LinkedIn profile and we have a job that's just right for you. And then you look at the job offer and it doesn't match your skills at all, so you know you've been spammed. But a user won't think twice if we get like a LinkedIn job offer email. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the filter dynamic. So rather than having it come from a set IP address or with a set subject line, what if we made it so it could be from any sender with any subject line? Our payload could even call back to different IP addresses in different ports. That'd be pretty awesome, right? I call this a dynamic Outlook trigger. So what it's going to do is instead of searching, it's going to load up the emails in the same manner, but instead of searching them all for the sender address or the subject line, it's going to scan the body of the email looking for a series of trigger words. So I have it define 3 words because you don't want false positives kicking off your payload all the time. So it's going to look for 3 words. You want to make them common words that will show up in a normal email and won't look weird. Cyber Hadoop should not be one of your trigger words. You want it to be something that would be hard to notice. But you also need it to be 3 words that are unlikely to be in an email from a regular user. So since they're usually computery emails from LinkedIn, I'd pick like cyber battlefield or something buzzwordy like that, or, cyber warfare or cyber security. And then things like the word LinkedIn. So I saw it on your LinkedIn profile. And then something like interested or independent recruiter or what have you. So you pick your 3 trigger words. When it finds that trigger, those trigger words, what it's then going to do is it's going to look through the email and it's going to find a URL. If there's a URL in the email, it will take that URL, it'll do an NS lookup on it on the background so that it pulls an IP address from that URL. So that way, if you just modify your name record to point to a different IP address, it'll call out to a different IP. Also, we need a port, not just an IP. So what it does is it scans through the entire email and it finds any number that is in the accepted port range. So if it's between the number 1 and 65,535, it's going to say, okay, that's my port. So a couple things you need to consider. One, in your trigger email, do not put 2 URLs. it will confuse the crap out of it. Do not put two numbers that fall in that port range. That will also confuse the crap out of it. Other than that, there's not really any rules. So pick 3 trigger words, load your trigger words up, make them whatever you want, and you can, as long as every trigger email you send has those 3 trigger words, a URL, and a number, and every email pretty much has a URL in it, right? In the signature block, or sometimes even in the middle of the text, somebody always mentions their email address or something along those lines. And a number, port range, that's the way I've been most commonly using it. Is it's not unusual to have your street address of your business in your signature block, right? So the street address can be the number of the port you want to call back, right? A 4-digit to 5-digit number, that can be a street address. So come here. This is our dynamic Outlook trigger that I am going to. All right. In this case, I just used the ISE to load my script because it made life a little bit easier. So we loaded up the script. Our trigger words are right there. So any email that contains those 3 words, it's going to kick off our action. Now, in this case, for this demo, calculator wouldn't really suffice. So when it detects the words, I'm having it write to a notepad document, just a text document, what the IP address and the port that it's going to call back to, and then the payload is Notepad to open that document. So it's going to execute. Down here, I used Chiron Tech, my company website, as the URL. So you can see that it's supposed to call back to 218 something. That's what the NS lookup for our particular IP address is going to be. So the script is watching and waiting. It's going through its verbose. Didn't find the email, started over. Didn't find the email, started over. So once I do move the email from the junk folder to the inbox, it will trigger it. It doesn't take long. It actually scans emails really fast. Each email is going to take it like a fraction of a second. So you can scan through a whole inbox pretty quickly. Ta-da! So it pops up and said it's going to call back to this IP address and this port. It's as simple as that. I like things being dynamic. I like the fact that I don't have a signaturable trigger. Who's going to write a signature that looks for 3 words in the body of an email? I wouldn't. It would be a huge pain. All right. So what would be the only thing that is better than having triggerable access? What if you didn't have to get on the box at all, right? That would be incredibly awesome. So getting shell is awesome, but what if you don't need one? What if I don't have to get on that box at all? There's some actions you have to get to shell on the box to do. If you don't know what you're doing on the target or where things are going to be located, yeah, you need an interactive shell. But what if I have sustained collection I want to get off of a target? So I know what directory the files are in. I just want to copy those files and see what's in them. Or maybe I just want to pull a list of the users, what have you, some static information about the box or a static location. I can use Outlook to automate that process. So I don't even have to bother getting on the box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up with the commands that I want. They're going to have to be in a single line separated by semicolons. So it has to be PowerShell commands, and they have to be on a single line separated by semicolons. So you can't take like 35 million scripts and load them all up in there and send them. It's not going to work that way. I could probably get it to work that way, but it's going to take a hot minute and a fair bit of coding. So if you have simple commands, though, you can use this method. What we're going to do is we're going to take our commands in a document. We're going to attach that document to an email that we're sending to the target. When it hits the target, it's going to pack. It's going to be our trigger. It's going to get recognized as our trigger. It's going to take our script of commands. It's going to run them. and then it's going to email the results back to us so that we don't have to actually get on the box. So a couple little things you need to consider here. For starters, don't try to just put a PS1 script and send it. Turns out that Outlook views a PowerShell script the same way it views an executable. If you send an email to someone with an XD as an attachment, I promise you they will never get it. It will, at a minimum, go to the junk folder. Most likely it'll get quarantined or deleted. So don't send a PS1 script either. It will definitely send it to at least the junk folder. So there's two ways we can get around that. One, we could just put our script in the body of the email, and it could just grab that body, save it as a variable, and run it. Okay, but now you have a really suspicious looking email that just went to them, right? You've got an email that just says, like, you know, get process, get user, get host, and that's not a normal email. So I think the better option is to throw it in an attachment. Now obviously your attachment is going to be a series of commands, so you're not going to want to leave this there for a long time. You'll probably want to delete this one so they don't get the list of commands. Also, when we send the response back, it's going to generate an email. So we're going to want to delete that out of the sent items, because the only thing that looks fishier than a weird email that came in is if you replied to it and you don't remember sending the reply. It's kind of a little red flag. So we're going to attach a text file to the document. Once it comes in and it recognizes that our email matches the trigger, I used a dynamic trigger for this, but you could use a static one, say if it comes from this side or this sender with this subject line, whatever you want. Once it recognizes that it's a trigger email, it's going to take the contents of the attachment, save them as a variable. It's then going to feed them to PowerShell to execute it. The output of the commands are going to be written temporarily to a .tmp file in the user's temp directory, which will then be added as an attachment to the outgoing email that it's going to send back to us, and it's then going to delete all the files that it created. It's going to delete the emails it created. It's going to clear them out of the deleted items folder as well. So, yeah. Steps. I have this set so just like the other ones, if you want to monitor the junk folder or the inbox, it'll work for either one. It's just a different switch that you feed the script to tell it where to look. It does have to save the attachment to disk for a hot minute. I couldn't get it to read the contents, store them in memory as a variable, and then pass the variable to PowerShell to have it execute. I don't know why. It should be pretty simple to do, but it failed every time that I tried, and I finally got frustrated and said, screw it, I'll write something to the temp directory. It's only there for like a second, and as long as it's not an executable file, the AV product shouldn't scan it. So once it writes it to disk, it's then going to run the script, save the output to another temp file. It then sends the results to the sender address. So whatever email it came from is the one it's going to send the email back to. It's then going to delete everything, clean up, and life is good. So I'm going to go ahead and play the video for this. You will notice there are some pop-ups with this video, and we will we'll go over why those pop-ups are there in a moment. Yeah. So the pop-ups, you'll notice they're very obvious pop-ups. So the first one is going to be Outlook saying, hey, someone's trying to access Outlook. Do you want to allow them to do this? And the script will just pause until the user clicks yes, allow it for X amount of time. The second one is going to be, an outside application is trying to send an email on your behalf. Do you want to allow this to happen? So both bad pop-ups. But it's waiting. It's a really simple one. I believe I have it running like git process. So it's just running a simple one-line command. It's going to execute it, and then we're going to look in the sent items and at the attachment in the sent email back out to see what it returned, which will actually be the process list on this box. So when we start the script momentarily, this video might be a minute longer than I thought it was. Okay, so the script's running. You can see it's sitting there, it's looking and it's thinking. It's obviously not finding the email because it's not there. It's in the junk folder. There's the first pop-up. It says, hey, somebody's trying to access Outlook. Do you want to allow this? So we're going to say, sure, allow it for a minute. The script executes. Now it's like, hey, someone's sending an email on your behalf. Do you want to allow this? We are going to say yes. And it will send the email response, and life will be good. If we then look at the sent items folder, you can see that there is a text document attached to it. I just had it fire back with a generic email response. It says something like, here is the email, here's the information you requested, and then it has the text file. The script would normally clean this up and clean all the evidence up, but then I wouldn't have had proof that it worked. So I commented out those sections of the code to begin with. So it ran our process list. You can see it does match the process list of what is actually on the box. So it did what it was supposed to do, and life was good and wonderful. I love it when a plan comes together. All right. So these are just rough tools. Obviously, they could use some finesse and polish. I basically made them as proof of concept tools. There's things that I would tweak about them. For starters, I would add encryption. Customers don't usually like it when you take your information, their information, do not encrypt it, and then send it out to some random email address. They get a little angry and you're not invited back in their network again. I didn't put the encryption in yet because I don't want to try rolling my own encryption. Historically, that does not go well. And I wanted to make sure that the scripts would work and function on older versions of PowerShell. And nowadays, you can just tell it to, if you have like PowerShell version 5, you can tell it to encrypt the contents for you. There's commandlets for it, but the older PowerShell version doesn't support them. You have to go through a long series of steps to encrypt the data. So I would do that. Also, I would like to eventually take all the pieces, merge them together into one script, one ring to rule them all, and have one thing that does everything for you. So it could set up your persistence. A lot of these could be done for the same thing, right? You could have the automation set up, and if you needed shell, just leave your payload on the box as well, and the text file that you attach just says start process whatever your payload is. So the automation could just start your payload and then return an email to you that says, hey, your payload just called you back. So you can merge them in that sense and use one for multiple functions. I would like to get them all together. So it's kind of shady to tell people how to do awesome things and then not tell them how to protect their networks from these awesome things. So how do you protect yourself? Step one is kill your AV product. I know that doesn't seem like a good thing. I could go on for hours and hours about the shortcomings of antivirus products. Personally, my AV product is sysinternals. I don't even run one on my boxes because I think they're all total crap. I can do more with sysinternals to find malware on my box than any AV product I know. So those wonderful pop-ups in the fourth video. If you notice the first three videos, there's a little thing in the top corner that said, Komodo, you are protected. It's because it had an AV product. The fourth one, we got these pop-ups because there's no AV product. Outlook has built-in security features to protect you. They are things like if someone tries to access Outlook, it makes a pop-up that says, do you want to allow this and for how long? If it tries to send an email from an outside application, it makes a pop-up that says, hey, someone's doing this, it's shady. If you install a security product and it registers and is fully updated, Outlook then assumes that the AV product is going to do the protection for them and that they don't actually, Outlook doesn't have to do anything. So it disables all the built-in protections for Outlook. So that would be thing number one is get an AV product that doesn't suck, probably pay for it. Yeah. There is no good free AV product. People ask me all the time, what's a great AV product? I was like, how much are you looking to spend? They're like, nothing. I'm like, there isn't one. Sorry. No one gives away amazing things for free. So short of that, your only real option is to catch these things when they happen and catch them quickly. At the end of the day, there's almost nothing you can do on a Windows box that there's not a way to capture it in the event logs. And yes, an attacker can just blow away the entire event log, but who really does that? I mean, then you know the exact date and time that something bad happened on the box. It'll be the time when there's an entry that says the event log was cleared. So there's a number of things you can do in the event logs that'll catch these things. For starters, audit process creation. When you audit process creation, if you're on Windows 7 or newer and you have that patch installed, there's an option that says include command line. So when this executes, every process that starts up, it also puts the exact command line that started that process. So yeah, you had PowerShell kickoff. Well, what started PowerShell? And it will have the trigger line that your persistence point started. Pretty easy to catch things then, assuming that someone actually looks at the event logs. Other things, turn on PowerShell logging. So it's there for a reason on kernel 6 and newer, or at least 6.1 and newer. There is a special event log just for PowerShell. It should be used. If you have PowerShell 4 or newer, there's even this great thing called mandatory transcription. So what this is going to do is every time PowerShell starts, it's going to create a transcript. So this time that PowerShell started, the time that it stopped, and in between those, every command that was executed and the output from those commands. And it writes all this off to a text document. You can turn it on to make it mandatory, so every PowerShell script that runs on the box gets carefully cataloged and saved in a series of text files that you can then read and see who's owning you. It's a great feature that, I don't know, I guess defenders don't use, but they really should. All right, so some quick little credits. You have Ed Wilson, Microsoft scripting guy. Again, he's the one, he had exporting your Outlook calendar. That's the article that gave me the inspiration to data mine the crap out of Outlook. And all the other trigger things, they came originally from Matt Nelson's trigger script that is on his own webpage. It's a good little trigger script. Again, he did it as very rough proof of concept code. He had no intention of actually using it. So I just took his ideas and expounded on them and made slightly more advanced proof of concept code. That is my GitHub link where all the scripts from today's talk are up there. You're more than welcome to take them, play with them, do what you would like. Again, I would probably tweak them a bit before using them in a real environment. That is about all I have. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
The biggest hurdle in this beginning of management are getting past the standards of the conference. That's the gateway into the system. In order to spoof something that lowers the confidence level, you said that you have to have access to something that's on a trusted machine or IP or
To get past the transport.
Or say if you're trying to get in through a spam email or through a payload, not sent by whatever security measures they have as spam, would you need to be on an IP or a bot that's on a trust level authority?
Ideally, yeah, you're going to have to be from something internal to begin with. Exactly, yeah. But it's not like you'd be able to install the scripts on the box you weren't already on anyways. The big thing, yeah, to get past the SCL, I mean, you have to set a rule and modify it, and it's really hard to do that. If you have a really bad admin who likes to, remote into his Exchange server from home and assumes his creds are safe, if you've managed to get the admin's creds, there's no reason you can't PowerShell remote into that Exchange box from anywhere. And then once you do that, you can modify everything to your heart's content. You can set specific SCLs so that your particular emails just don't get stopped. Yes?
Kind of bring up this point. I did a record recently where we were able to spoof the IP address, but we did open source searching to determine their business partner. And a lot of times clients have to open up their partner email domain by domain listing, not by IP listing, because people change their email providers and they run through some sort of outbound spam stuff. So if you can try to find out who their trusted partners are, their supplier, supply chain people, you might have a better chance of getting it past their initial spam filter.
Yeah. You can even, it's a little off topic, but you can even have fun. There's a send mail message commandlet in PowerShell that it doesn't work very well for external emails, but once you get on a semi-trusted box, It's a lot of fun. You can specify any from address you want. It doesn't care. It doesn't check it. It just populates the field. So I sent one of my coworkers a email saying, "Oh, I really love your work. Can you send us a resume and can we get together? I think I have a good opportunity for you." And I sent it from mzuckerberg@facebook.com. And it sends it just as that. Makes a nice little pop-up. It's not going to get you past your SCLs, but you can, if you need to spoof emails, it's built into PowerShell to spoof emails. Yes?
When the script is reading the inbox, is that reading just emails on the client server, or is it also reading emails that are on the exchange server?
It is only going to be reading what's on the client, whatever that Outlook has access to. So if they opened up their Outlook and looked in the folder, anything they can see, the script can see as well. Yes? Not that I've found. I tried it on a couple different Outlook versions. I believe it works on everything 2007 and newer. I didn't try anything older than that. But regardless of the API they use, they all still use the same set COM objects and the same .NET assemblies. So that's what we're actually grabbing and leveraging. So by doing that, it doesn't matter what API they use on the side. We're using basically the blood and guts of the system itself. Anybody else? No? Well, in that case, I believe it's just about beer 30. Oh, yeah. Go drink. Thank you.